All right, everybody, welcome back. And as advertised, we're going to be talking about the existence of God this week. Last week we talked about faith and reason, or 2 weeks ago we talked about faith and reason, kind of what we can show, what truths we can show from faith and what truths we can show from reason. And, in terms of reason, we can't get a complete picture of God. We can't get a picture of all of his characteristics. But what we can get a picture of is that, he is there. And, an example I'd like to, discuss is like, you have a detective who comes onto a crime scene, and he discovers that it's a murder scene, but he doesn't know who the murderer was or why there was a murderer in the first place, but he knows that the murderer exists. Well, with reason, we can kind of deduce some of that too about God, but it takes faith and divine revelation to kind of get that complete picture. And so based on that, there's different types of arguments for the existence of God, and they aren't mutually exclusive. But one is it's cosmological. There's an example from cosmological. It's data from without. Okay, so we look at the universe, and we can determine things about God from the outside. Then there's psychological, which is data from within. You look inside, the human self, and you can kind of determine certain characteristics from God. And then you have strong probability arguments, which they're not quite proofs, but it's very likely that God exists. And then also one argument about faith, having faith in God. There's good reasons to believe in God because, there's good reasons to have faith in him. And it's not necessarily a proof. We're going to go on to Pascal's wager. This is what I'm talking about. It's not a proof, but it's a bet, all right? And there's a certain point in our lives we all have to kind of make a choice, whether to believe in God or not. And, there's 4 possibilities. There's 3 different outcomes. And so, first of all, you have God exists or he doesn't. That's an objective fact. He can't both exist and not exist, and at the same time, so you have God exists or he doesn't. And then also, you have to make a choice, I believe or I do not believe. And that results in this little 2x2 chart here. If I believe in God exists, I get to heaven. If I do not believe in he exists, I go to hell. And if anything else, if God doesn't exist, the likely place is eternal non-existence. And so, actually, there's only one way to win. And so this is Pascal's wager. If you believe that God, in God exists, then you get to heaven. If not, nothing happens, so it doesn't matter, or you end up in hell, which is extremely painful. So, logically, if you follow Pascal's wager, you get that one conclusion in heaven. However, there is a gaping hole in this wager. It's kind of presupposes that if you believe, then you're already saved, or if you don't believe, you're not saved. There's kind of that presupposition in there that that's up to debate, and that's another topic we can talk about when we get to our discussion. And then also this with Pascal's wager, it could be selfish, because it's all about what I want. I want to be eternally happy, so I believe God exists. It could be selfish. But I think I ultimately found personally, because since I did this, this was kind of the thought process I had when I got confirmed, was like, okay, that's the only way I can win, so logically I should do that. It ultimately led me to a personal relationship with God, because I believed in God, and then I started researching more and more about him, and then, I started learning more and more apologetics and everything, so that's... Yeah, and so I guess it can be kind of a stepping stone for having a personal relationship with God. So let's move on to the actual proofs for the existence of God. And I just want to start with a basic logic lesson. In order to have a conclusion in any argument or any philosophy, you have to have 2 premises. And basically what that is, so if we conclude that, I guess we'll start with the premises. Socrates is a man. That's premise number 1. All men are mortal. Then we can conclude that Socrates is mortal. All right, so the 2 premises can build into a conclusion. And we'll go more into that
It has
here.
to have something in common also.
Yeah,
Properties.
right, yeah, you have to add them together in terms of having something in common. Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, and so therefore you can get Socrates is mortal. And then, okay, so when we talk about the Kalam argument, from the book, it was number 6, and it's a cosmological argument, meaning that it comes from without. We look at the nature of the universe, and we can deduce that God exists from that. So Kalam comes from his speech. It comes from Arabic, and we get the 2 premises that first, everything which exists has a cause for its existence, and then second, the universe began to exist, and we conclude from there that therefore the universe has a cause for its coming into being. And we can actually deduce a couple characteristics from God that, first of all, God is immaterial, because in order to create matter in space, God would have to be immaterial. In order to create time, God has to be eternal, because time started when the Big Bang happened. And then he has to be powerful, if not all-powerful, because creating something from nothing there has to be some power there, right? So anyway, in the book, the authors talk about the first premise, and the first premise. Can you go back to that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. First premise: everything which exists has a cause for its existence. They say in there that that is actually obvious to everybody except for people in grad schools and insane asylums. So, but recent debate has, about quantum physics has brought up some questions, and so, we'll talk about quantum physics real quick. I saw something on the History Channel, and it was a show that kind of discussed whether the universe required a creator or not. And what they said was that particles can go from non-existence to existence, and it would not violate the laws of quantum physics if the particles from the Big Bang appeared from nothing. Well, we got to think about that for a second, because if think about the concept of nothing, and from nothing comes nothing. You can't really get anything from nothing, and they were presupposing in that argument that there was the laws of physics. They existed before matter came into being, before the Big Bang just happened to occur out of nothing, and so they presuppose that there was something when there was nothing, which was the laws of physics. So that's one thing. But also, we're not talking about particles appearing out of nothing in quantum physics. We're talking about them appearing in a vacuum. And a vacuum isn't nothing. A vacuum is just kind of a low state level of, it's kind of like empty space. So empty space isn't nothing. It's just empty space. So. And also, in terms of causation, there are some interpretations of the laws of quantum physics that suggest that there actually is, a cause. We just don't quite know what it is for the cause of the, particles coming into existence. So, in the second premise, go back to the slide before, real quick. You can just hit the back arrow above that, back arrows. There we go. Okay, so the universe began to exist, and now
now go.
Now go to the slide. So natural sciences suggest the beginning, and the philosophical argument. Well, okay, so we have the Big Bang theory, and most scientists, as we kind of explained last week, most scientists believe that there was the Big Bang, but we also have philosophical arguments that suggest the beginning too. So the first question I pose is, can an infinite task ever reach a certain end? Well, let's think about that question for a second. So we have an end that we're trying to get to, and we have an infinite amount of tasks that are trying to get to the end. So an infinite amount of tasks need to happen before we get to a certain end. So an infinite amount of stuff needs to happen. That, doesn't quite make sense, but to kind of illustrate that point a little better, I have an example. So, you go to the DMV, and to get to the counter, you have to pull a number, right? And let's say, and that causes you to be called, to go to the counter. is you pulling the number. But let's say you have to pull a number before that to pull a number, but you have to pull a number before that to pull that number, all the way to infinity. So looking at that, you know you're never going to get to the counter, because you can never pull a number and you're never going to get called up to the counter. Now, if you see somebody get called up to the counter, you know that it's going to end somewhere, and somehow you're going to work your way back up to the counter. And so, same thing with the universe. If we're looking at today as the counter, today as the end, and you have an infinite amount of days leading up to today, then you're never going to actually get to today. But since we have today, since we're in today right now, you know that there was a start. So philosophically, we can conclude that there was a start to the universe just based on the theory of infinite days and the universe always existing. So let's see. Okay, so that's the Kalam argument, and we're going to move on to the argument from desire, which was number 16. This one's a psychological argument, and basically the first premise is every innate desire has an object that can satisfy it. And second is no object in the world can satisfy the desire for happiness. So for the first premise, every innate desire has an object that can satisfy it. So as we look, okay, we got to define our terms here. Innate, natural desires.